Hello, Internet. This was supposed to be a channel about the psychology behind rational versus irrational thought, how we perceive the world accurately and how we don't. That's my idea of fun, because I'm a giant nerd. But I've realized that learning how to find accurate information, weighing it appropriately, doesn't really matter if we can't use that ability to address the most important problems in our lives. Speaking mainly for Americans now, but probably the whole world, we have one hell of a problem.
We got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. Not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. They're pouring into our country.
Welcome to Sorting Static. This is part of a series on U.S. politics. Donald Trump took office on January 20th, 2025. His first action was to pardon everybody involved in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, even the people convicted of sedition against the United States. This sends a clear message. If you commit sedition or violence in Trump's name, the law does not apply to you. This action mirrors the early days of Mussolini and Hitler. Once they had power, they used it to prevent their most violent supporters from facing justice. At the same time, they fed these groups information that they knew would encourage their violence. They used the law to go after their enemies, exactly like Trump has promised to do. It didn't take them long to establish complete control over society and the institutions that form the bedrock of society. For Mussolini, it took about 2 years. For Hitler, it only took 3 months. And it's important to remember that these countries didn't start with death camps. It took a long time to get power in the first place and then work up to that. Something to keep in mind. Trump himself is protected from any possible prosecution by a recent Supreme Court ruling. In Trump v. United States, the court ruled that presidents' motives can't even be questioned if their actions fall under what the court calls official conduct. That includes if the president chooses to prosecute members of the press who say things that he doesn't like, maybe insult him even. And you might ask, where's the line between a president's core powers, where he can't be prosecuted, and other actions a president might take where he could be prosecuted? Surely if Trump ordered an assassination, he could be prosecuted for that. Nobody knows the answer to the first question, and the answer to the second question is no. Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, describes the presidential actions that are now immune to criminal prosecution. Maybe the assassin could be prosecuted, but not the man who gave the order. And of course, Trump can always just pardon this assassin, just like he did with the January 6th protesters, and then nobody faces justice at all. Here's the New York State Bar Association describing the main problem with this ruling. The court split possible presidential actions into 3 different groups. The Supreme Court itself said that they're not sure how to tell the difference between actions that fall into any of these groups. And there's a straightforward reason why they don't know. However they came up with this idea of core powers, it's not in the Constitution. You can read Article 2 for yourself. It's about 2 pages in my printed copy of the Constitution. Shouldn't take you very long. This ruling actually violates the Constitution in at least 2 places. First is the Supremacy Clause. This states that the ultimate authority in the United States is our system of laws. So you've got the laws, then the president, not the other way around. The second is the Impeachment Clause. Notice that the section doesn't just say that Congress can remove the president if they feel like it. It lists out specific conditions where that punishment would apply. But if it's a matter of law, that when the president does these things, they are not crimes, then how can Congress ever find that this condition applies? How can the president be impeached for a crime that's not a crime when the president does it? With this ruling, there is effectively no check on presidential power from the judicial branch. That only leaves Congress, which is currently completely dominated by a Trump-centered cult of personality that we still call the Republican Party for some reason. This cult of personality is also the only constitutionally empowered institution left that can hold him responsible for his actions. To summarize the situation, Trump will pardon those who commit crimes in his name, even violent insurrections that attack basic functions of the country, like certifying a vote. And Trump himself will never face prosecution for anything, including leading the insurrection in 2020 or attempting to have votes thrown out for 7 states. Those states that dared to vote against him. In these cases, and in any future crimes he may commit, his motives can't even be examined for criminal intent. Maybe the worst part about this situation is the fact that Trump still has broad support based on a series of pretty obvious lies once you start digging into the details, but it plays to a common historical narrative about a secretive deep state that's both strong and clever enough to be a threat, but also so weak and incompetent that they have to be overthrown just based on that. Whatever crime a member of the Trump movement commits, it's very easy to predict the response by his supporters. They will simply make a vague claim that Democrats or some other deep state organization has done something similar or, even worse, of course. This point rarely comes with any kind of evidence. It's an emotional appeal. Once they've delivered that emotion, the talking point has served its purpose and they will change the topic. No matter what, their response will never actually address what Trump or his associates are accused of or the evidence that demonstrates guilt or innocence. This kind of conspiracy thinking is directly in line with fascist movements of the past. I'll probably go through some of these more popular conspiracy movements in detail. I'm a nerd, that's fun to me. But the details don't actually matter too much. Even if you convince a Trump supporter that there was no election fraud, they'll immediately slot in a new conspiracy that justifies whatever Trump is telling them, or that leads to whatever conclusion their tribe is telling them they must reach. You might remember the story surrounding January 6th. At first it wasn't a big deal, or it didn't happen at all, and then it was perpetrated by Antifa, and then finally it actually was Trump supporters, but they were justified because of fraud. As long as you reach the conclusion that Trump was in the right and the establishment was in the wrong, they don't care how you reach the conclusion. It's fundamentally anti-intellectual, anti-logic, anti-evidence. Trump calls the press and other groups who have done investigative work that finds him guilty of various crimes. These are enemies of the people to him.
I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are.
CNN, fake news, MSNBC, that's really the enemy of the people.
A California man was arrested for making violent threats against the Boston Globe. In one of 12 calls to the paper, Robert Chain allegedly said, "You're the enemy of the people. We're going to kill every effing one of you." In another call, Chain allegedly said, "As long as you keep attacking the president, I will continue to threat, harass, and annoy the Boston Globe."
He's also made similar statements about universities. His supporters no longer trust Google because it delivers information that makes Trump look bad. Basically, any source of information or truth that is not focused on Trump as a savior is evil and wrong and a product of a deep state conspiracy. And this applies especially to internal dissent. People like Mitt Romney or Mike Pence, who have been conservatives and members of the Republican Party their entire lives. These people are now ostracized simply because they contradicted Trump. You can listen to an example of this from Trump himself. Let's listen to excerpt from the Georgia call. This was 4 days before the January 6th attack on the Capitol and a month after Georgia had finished their third recount of the vote that found that Biden won, Trump lost. This entire call is available on YouTube. Highly recommend you listen to the whole thing.
And also that Dominion took out machines. That Dominion is really moving fast to get rid of their machinery. Do you know anything about that? Because that's illegal.
This is Ryan, Germany. No, Dominion has not moved any machinery out of Fulton County. We're having.
Well, but have they moved? Have they moved the inner parts of the machines and replaced them with other parts?
No.
You sure, Ryan?
I'm sure, Mr. President.
And what about the ballots? The shredding of the ballots. Have they been shredding ballots?
No. The only investigation that we have into that, they have not been shredding any ballots. There was an issue in Cobb County where they were doing normal, office shredding, getting rid of old stuff, and we investigated that. But this is stuff from, past elections.
No, I don't know.
That's what
it doesn't pass the smell test, though, because we hear they're shredding thousands and thousands of ballots, and now what they're saying, we're just cleaning up the office. I don't think that plays.
Mr. President, the problem you have with social media, people can say anything.
No, this isn't social media. This is Trump media. It's not social media. It's really not. It's not social media. I don't care about social. But
It doesn't matter that they investigated these claims and found no fraud. The only thing that matters is they didn't reach the conclusion that Trump wanted them to reach. So I'd suggest not spending too much time trying to figure out the complicated twists and turns of every new bit of nonsense. Instead, remember what it means simply being an American. Think back to the high school classes where we talked about the Constitution, or those endless documentaries about World War II and the heroic soldiers saving liberal societies all around the world. This is back when, the History Channel was the History Channel. We are a democratic republic with a founding document, the Constitution. Understanding how and why this country formed the way it did, that's a good place to start. We're a nation that many thousands have sacrificed for. Millions, probably. Our troops, of course, but also civil rights leaders. Most of them were killed for their efforts before they could even see the better world they were making. They chose to do it anyway. They knew the risks. And all the little sacrifices that everyday normal Americans make just so our country can function. They spend time away from their kids so they can fight fires in California or some other state where they don't even live. Some of them are using their master's degree in engineering to teach high school kids about math and physics. Most Americans can tell you about, at least one high school teacher they had like this who made the rest of their life possible. People who chose to give back instead of just building wealth for themselves. All of this cannot have been for nothing. General Milley is a 3-star general who served with Trump. Listen to the warning that he gave in his farewell address in 2024. It's fairly short, about a minute and a half. I'll just play the whole thing.
It's not about us. It's about something much larger than all of us. It's about our democracy. It's about our republic. We are unique among the world's armies. We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that it's America, and we're willing to die to protect it. Those values and ideas are contained within the Constitution of the United States of America, which is the moral North Star for all of us who have the privilege of wearing the cloth of our nation. It is that document that all of us in uniform swear to protect and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those who sacrificed themselves on the altar of freedom in the last 2.5 centuries of this country must not have done so in vain. The millions wounded in our nation's wars did not sacrifice their limbs and shed their blood to see this great experiment in democracy perish from this earth. No, we, the American people, we, the American military, must never turn our back on those that came before us. And we will never turn our back on the Constitution. That is our North Star. That is who we are, and that is why we fight. Thank you, and may God bless our military, and may God bless the United States of America.
This resonates with me for a very specific reason. See, growing up, I never knew either side of my parents' families very well. They had a falling out a long time before I was born and ended up moving to a different state, far away. But one story about my great-grandpa did reach me. It was about how my great-grandpa flew in a bomber, World War II. He was an engineer, so it was his job to keep the plane in the air as anti-aircraft tried to shoot them down. He wasn't a pilot, so, had to deduct some cool points. I wanted to be a pilot, but, combat engineer is still pretty cool. Nobody's perfect. I remember asking if it was his job to patch the bullet holes, and my parents just laughed at me and said, yeah, he definitely did that. Later, as I got older, I started to read more about the history of World War II, and I learned that bombers were very inaccurate. at the time. So to be sure that they would hit their target, they would end up sending these massive fleets of bombers. And the Axis side dealt with this by building a massive amount of anti-aircraft. It became a numbers game. How many bombers could the Axis side shoot down before they got near their target? How many bombs could each bomber carry to maximize their chance of hitting the target? There was a lot of math. For the crew, it was a lot simpler. Every time they got in the plane, there was a certain percentage chance that they wouldn't come back. Same for all their friends. And dying in a bomber is ugly. They mostly didn't explode or crash right away. It was much more likely they would catch fire because of all the fuel and other material on board. And in those cases, the crew would try to bail out. But if they couldn't escape, if they were injured by whatever damaged the plane, they would just be stuck there as the plane slowly drifted down on fire until it crashed. As you probably know, planes are designed to stay in the air. They don't crash quickly. They glide. They knew all of this every time they got in the plane, and they kept doing it anyway. The more I learn about these men, what they did, and how their sacrifice was remembered, the more certain I am that this fascist movement was only possible after they stopped mattering as a voting group. That entire generation is gone now. If Trump and his allies are allowed to continue reshaping America into this illiberal, whatever it is they're going to call it, where the press are afraid to speak truth to power, and election officials have to worry about threats to their lives if the election doesn't go a certain way, then I don't know why he got in that plane.